In this video, I'm going to cover 8 different behaviors, what I'm calling motion behaviors. Basically, there's going to be bounce, climb, conveyor, slip, ladder, parachute, teleport, and lastly, zipline. And so what I've chosen to do is create a large obstacle course, kind of similar to, it made me think of American Ninja Warrior. So let's take a look at my run through on this obstacle course.
Welcome back to the Max Games, brought to you by Blood Moon Interactive Studios. I'm your host, Pete Pixel. Get ready for intense action and the thrill of victory as our next contestant steps into the virtual arena.
All right, so that was the obstacle course. Pretty fun stuff. I had a lot of fun setting it up and testing it out and getting it all to work. So let me show you how I did that. All right, so let's take a look first at bounce. So I have these balls here. They're just kind of there for looks. Really the magic happens with the zone right below them. And I've got it stretched over the top so that as I came down and landed on one of the balls, it would just continue to bounce. So I've got the bounce height set up at 300. That might have been a little strong, honestly, but it got me over the gap, which is all I wanted. Velocity is just the push forward as you're bouncing. And then, of course, I added a sound to it for the bounce effect. And then here I've got climb. I think it's called climber. Behavior is called climber, yeah. So what's interesting about this one is there's actually an object included in Max. So if we look at climber, there's an object here. You can see, if you look closely, it says front on the front of the object, and that's really important. You want to make sure that it's facing in the correct direction. Let's go through the settings real quick. We have prompt here. Prompt text is what you see on the screen that tells you, the directions. Up for W for up, S for down, space for jump off, and so on. You could also add a mount key, and that would be what's required to actually attach yourself to the object. In my case, I chose not to do that. The climbing speed's pretty obvious. We have slow, medium, quick, and fast. I chose medium. I thought medium was good enough, and I'll show you also why I chose medium here in a second. You have the grip adjustment. Again, I'll get back to that in just a moment. The climb style, you've got with weapons or hide weapons. I didn't have any weapons, so it was obvious to hide. And then the exit force. The exit force by default was set to 0.50. I chose to double it, and I alluded to, I would get to why here in a second. So let me show you why. So up here at the top, we have this little bit of lip over the top of the obstacle, and also you can kind of see that the obstacle is sunk in to the climbing object, which is invisible. And there's a couple different reasons for that. One, I wanted to make sure that it looked like I was actually physically on the block. that rope texture doesn't look as great as I'd hope, but that's okay. And then I have a little bit of a lip here because of the way you exit. So the exit force has to do with how you exit and how much push off you get when you exit. And 0.50 just wasn't enough. So I doubled it. That was pretty good, but I noticed that it has a lot to do with which direction you're facing. So if I were looking up as I'm climbing, when I got to the top, I'm liable to be pushed off straight up or not quite, at an angle enough to land on the block and end up falling back down. So I was always trying to be careful to be looking straight forward when I hopped off, and then gave it a little more exit force to make sure that I stuck that landing. I could also use the grip adjustment, and that would help also. I didn't really need to. I was satisfied with the results, so I left it there. But to play around with those, the relationship between those three things are what matters. And I think if I were making something, a serious game for somebody else to play, I'd be a lot more careful about how I set that up and make sure that it works every time. So let's see. So we have Conveyor is next. I have to kind of click on it to make it show up. But again, you have an object. It's already in Max, and it is called Conveyor. It's right there. And also, similar to Climber, it says on here, front. It's really faint. I'd forgive you if you couldn't see that, but it does actually say it, so make sure it's facing the correct direction. The settings are actually very, very simple. The movement speed, I've got it set up pretty high because I wanted the appearance of me running across the narrow beam. But you could set up any way if you see fit. I think it's just a dial-in kind of thing. And then you can choose to either show or not show the conveyor. In my case, I've got it invisible. And I didn't add any sound to it because I'm just running across the beam. But you can imagine that if you have like a mechanical conveyor, it might make a sound. And then you can ignore this. This is just a sound zone. So when I got up to the top of the obstacle, you heard the crowd kind of cheer a little bit, and that's what that was for. Let's see here. So here we have Slip. This did not work as well as I had hoped, and it's not Slip's fault. Okay, Slip is meant to be for slipping. It's meant for be like an icy patch or something like that, where you just slip off of the surface of the ground that you're standing on. It's not slide. It's not the same thing. I was trying to use it as slide. It didn't really work as well as I had hoped, but I wanted to cover it anyways. So lesson learned. But what it does is you've got the velocity and you've got the counter force, and basically those two things work in tandem to sort of push you off. So if you play back that video, you'll see it kind of pushes me off. In fact, it pushed me over the top of this initial jump. So that's how strong that is. And I just let it stay that way because I wanted to talk about that, and I wanted to talk about how that can actually be like a violent push. So just be aware of that. Let's see. We have ladder here. Now ladder is very much like climber. It's got many of the same settings, not all the same settings, but many of the same settings. It's got the same sort of idiosyncrasy when it comes to when you get up to the top. Give yourself a little lip, give yourself a little exit force, and if you're really struggling, adjust the grip strength. I also brought this ladder in closer. This could have been a little bit further out. See, it's got that little attachment. I just kind of sunk it in a little bit. All those things, just kind of play with it. You'll get it right. Like I said, I would be a lot more cautious if I was building it for somebody else to use. All right, so this is probably, the next one's probably the most complex one that I set up. This took a little doing, and I'll explain everything about why, if I can get my camera to show up where I want it. All right, so we have this object here, which is called parachute. So if we were to search for parachute, that's what we're going to find in our objects, parachute. But that object is not what we want the character to know as parachute. That is really just an object that needs to be in the scene somewhere. It really doesn't matter where, somewhere in the level. And also I'll point out that it automatically has the behavior parachute attached to it. So you're going to want to change that to be no behavior selected. And the reason is this object is invisible. So if you were to sit it out for the player to pick up, they would just see the prompt. They wouldn't actually see an object. So we need a stand-in. So we have this. This is just a book bag object. There's a blue one as well. Those I think are in the booster pack. So if you don't already have the booster pack, it's got a lot of decent objects, but these are the ones I use. It doesn't have to be these; it could be anything. Make sure you set it to a dynamic object, which is collectible. And then let's take a look at the behavior. So always pay attention to this text here. We want physics off, collision none, gravity off, weight and friction off, and then we want to set up the text or all these prompts accordingly, right? So we have our pickup text. So we press E to pick it up, Q to deploy the parachute, E to dismount when you get to the bottom, or when you hit the ground, it'll dismount you as well, either way. But you can choose to dismount early. I did that in a test earlier and dropped to my death, so that was fun. And then we have the Mount Z and Mount Y adjustment. That just means where the model is in relation to the player character as you're floating down. I thought it looked pretty good by default, just where it was, so I left it there. But that's what that's for. We have the minimum deploy height. That has to do with how high up does your character need to be from the ground in order for you to use this object, right? So obviously we can't parachute off 10 feet. We got to be up in the air. But how far up is up to you. Higher the better, honestly. You want that height to be there. And also I'll point out that I'm doing this in an indoor environment, and it doesn't really play nice with indoor apparently. So you're going to, I did test it in an outdoor setting, and just out of the box default the way it was, it worked fine. It worked perfectly. So I think it has something to do with being indoors. It's not really meant to be used that way, but I think it worked well enough for what we needed. Let's see here. We have the drop speed, which obviously is just how fast are you falling. We have these next 4 are kind of related to one another, right? So you have the max speed, the min speed, right? So how fast can you travel? How slow can you travel? You have acceleration and deceleration. So when we press W, we move forward, and we're going to be accelerating as we move forward. So it's kind of like if you're in a parachute and you're leaning in, you're kind of falling a little bit faster. So you have a cap there of max speed 12. So if we're starting with a min speed of 4, that means that we accelerate 2 more times before we hit our max speed. You could also decelerate, and that would be pressing S on the control would kind of pull back. So it'd be like using flaps on a parachute. That's going to kind of slow you down. And then your turn speed. I didn't really turn in the video, but it does turn, and it turns really smoothly. So that's what that's for. And then parachute health is really just, you can get hurt, you can get shot at, and your parachute could break. So just be aware of that. And then lastly, let's see. Actually, not lastly. I spoke too soon. So we have parachute. That refers to the object, right? So this object, its name is parachute. So it's just referencing back to that object so it knows how to behave. So you can just leave that alone. And then the height text, or height display, I should say. So that's going to be, if you wanted to display how high you are at any given time, that's what that's going to be. We have the mode. Okay, so the mode is something I did want to get to. The mode has to do with its usage, right? So you can use it once and just discard it, or you can set it to be reusable. What happens is when you land, you set it down, and then you can pick it back up and reuse it. So that's what that does. And then obviously you have the sound areas. All right, so let's go down here to the next part. So where I landed, I just landed on this zone, and all I did here, this isn't really part of the behaviors I wanted to show, but it's just a trigger zone that's linked to the particle. So the particle turn on, it was really just for visuals. But here is actually what I wanted to show you. This is the teleport behavior. So now we're down here towards the ground, and we want to get back up there so we can start the second half of the obstacle course. So I did a teleport. The teleport zone height, that just means like how high can you be above the teleport zone and still have it work. So obviously I'm like right on it, so it doesn't really matter. It could have been a lot lower, but that's just the default. We have the teleport type, which is either instant, delayed, or delayed with a countdown. Obviously delayed would be however many seconds delayed, so this is the teleport delay here. So if I chose that, it would wait 2 seconds and then teleport me. I didn't use that. I used just instant. With delayed plus countdown, you'd actually see the countdown on the screen somewhere. Single use, reusable, obvious, what that does, whether or not you can continue to use it. The teleport delay we already talked about. The teleport effect is a little bit weird, and I think it would be kind of hard for me to verbally explain what this looks like. So I'm just going to demonstrate real quick. Let me just start this. Alright, so you just still through it. That's what we want. So that's what I mean by the teleport effect. It kind of pulls the camera forward. Let's see that one more time just so you can get a sense for what that does. Watch carefully. I'm just going to step forward. I'm not pressing W beyond just stepping into the portal. It has that kind of sinking forward motion to it. Really kind of strange. I chose not to use it because it was a little weird, but it's neat. It's a neat effect, and I can imagine other uses for such an effect. So it's kind of cool that it can do that. All right, so teleport destination. That has to do with where you're going to end up, right? So you have two choices. You can either use local or level. I'm going to talk about level first, even though I'm not using level. So level is going to correspond with this next setting. Otherwise, it's just going to ignore it. So if it's set to level, it's going to say, all right, I'm just going to use the storyboard logic. So whatever the next level is, that's where I'm going to end up. Or we can choose go to a specific level, and then we can tell it where to go, which level to go to next. So those are your options for that. Or you can do local. If you choose local like I did, that's inside the same level you're already in, and you have to tell it, well, where do you want to end up? And the way you do that is with a logic link. So if we turn on our logic link, just get up here. There we go. So you can see I've got a logic link kind of zipping on through and pointing to this little flag. It doesn't have to be a flag. It can really be just about anything that you want to point to, some object, that it can use as a point of reference. So that's what I chose to use just because it's invisible. It's kind of handy. And it just ports me right up in there. I'm using a sound effect for the zone, but you don't have to. All right. And that ended me up here. So the last behavior that are part of the motion behaviors that I wanted to demonstrate, there is a bonus behavior I want to talk about in a second. But the last motion behavior I wanted to cover in this video was Zipline. This was probably my favorite one just because it's so much fun. It is so much fun to do. You should try this as soon as you can. So you have three components really. You have two zipline anchors, and then optionally you have this zipline object here. This is not really necessary. I could delete it and it would still function and zip me down the same path because it's really just using the two zipline anchors and the relationship between them to establish the path. This is really more for visuals. So you can more or less just put it in place and ignore it from there. The real part of this is the zipline anchors. And so you want to attach the zipline behavior to it. They're already attached, but you want to make sure that that's attached to the object. Once again, you have a prompt text, right? EDU. So you saw that in the video when I walked up to it. I had to kind of look at it and get that prompt text to appear. Use range is just how close you have to be. The zip type has to do with directional. So I was going high to low. So that's what I chose. I could also do two-way. So theoretically, I could have gone back up the zip line. And then the zip speed, again, that's just personal preference. I think I upped it a little bit from its original just to kind of give it a little more zip. But you do what you feel is best for that speed. We have the zip release. So this is really important because I chose auto release, meaning I'm going to ride all the way down, and then when I get to the end, that's when it's going to release me automatically. I could have also chosen manual hold release. So what that means is you can see that the zip release text then applies. You would have a prompt telling you to hold E until you're ready to release. That means if you release E too soon, you could fall down and possibly hurt yourself or kill yourself. So that's what that's for. I just chose auto to keep it simple. And then lastly, we have visibility. I don't really understand why this is here, but all it really does is turn the anchor visible or invisible. I don't know why you would want an invisible zipline, but it's there if you need it. So there's that. Zip on down to the end. So just have some more sound files. And then lastly, I have a trigger zone to trigger the 3 particle effects just for the finish. So that was it. I do have one more behavior, guys, I want to show you guys, and I showed it to you in the beginning of the video. I think I owe it to you to show you how I did that. That's over here. Okay, so actually there's a couple of things. So the first thing I want to show you is I put a zone here, and I started my player, when I started to record that, be just ahead of it. And I added the behavior hide HUDs. So obviously that got rid of the health bar HUD there at the bottom. And then I walked up to this guy, so I got within the range of the of Pixel Pete here. Let's push him back a little bit. There we go. And he has stand and speak attached. Now, I'll do more NPC videos, and I'll probably cover this in that video as well. But just briefly, what it does is it plays a voice, and then it plays the speech that you give it. I recorded that. What I did was I typed up a quick speech. I threw it into an AI generator, like voice generator that goes text to speech, and then saved it as an MP3 and attached it to the speech here. So that's what got it. So basically, when I did that, when I attached the WAV file here, it was kind of neat. There was like this little box that showed up, and you'll see it if you ever use this, and it basically calculated the mouth movement, and it synced it up with the speech, and that's what gave him the appearance of actually saying the words. I thought that was the coolest thing. So a little bonus behavior for you for the motion video. If you liked this video, I sure hope you did, because as you can see, I put a lot of work into this. It spanned multiple weeks, in fact, putting together all of the stuff for this. So I really do hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I enjoyed it. Click the like button below, show me love, and if you are new here, or if you just haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time to go ahead and click that subscribe button. And then, just as an FYI, I don't keep a regular release schedule. So if you want a notification as to when the next video comes out, bell icon's going to be your friend for that. But that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching all the way through, and I'll see you in the next one.